the director of client experience. And in his past, he talked a lot about culture with the job he had. So I thought he was an ideal person to have on
Let's hope.
our streaming. It's not a
Let's
podcast.
hope. I'm excited to be here.
So, I mean, Nick, we often in the corporate world, we're just talking about culture all the time. We're talking about how to have a good culture, what to do, planning our culture. So why do we spend so much time on our corporate culture and we don't really think about our family culture?
It's fascinating to kind of think about, right, from a standpoint of in our businesses, and we've all been inundated with surveys and culture and how we communicate in business. We spend money, we fly people in, and we really kind of try to push these cultures forward because we've all seen, right, having a good culture is almost a recipe for success within your business. But yet at home, we don't necessarily do the same things that we do, right? Whether it be surveying our family or communicating with our family in that aspect of really being purposeful conversations within our culture. So yeah, it's fascinating to see.
I love how earlier you were talking about how you would get a survey for your team and you had to take a culture survey. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's one of those anxiety-ridden months that happens, right? You survey your team, how you communicate as a boss, how are you leading them? How do they feel? Do they feel safe, respected, heard, all these other things? And you get the score back. And if your score's low, you need to go meet with HR. There's a problem and you got to go deal with it. Or if it's good, right? You're all excited. You're on a high that the things that you put into place are there. And I see how it could lead into our personal lives, right? Into our personal space or family if we know our culture's bad.
Yeah, it does. It feels very vulnerable to find out what our true family culture is. In Cornology, we do a family culture score. Our goal is to give information, not to judge in any way. But I want to talk a little bit about how vulnerable it is because I came from a family that, way to put it is, it was a challenging childhood, right? So, and one day I'll tell my story, but for today's purposes, even though it was not a good place to be, we still had a culture. So it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, you have one. So my father was at one point a spy. And so because of that, we had a deep culture of keeping secrets. We did not tell anyone anything. That was part of our culture. It was without question. And it's because my dad talked about it all the time. Nobody should know anything we do, right? And it was a clearly defined line in our family. And obviously, with being in a bad childhood, we obviously were not emotionally safe. We really weren't physically safe. And so as a family, we did a lot of defaulting into like self-preservation. It wasn't about the team. It was about how do I stay alive myself and survive this world. But then at the same time, we had a family culture of we were expected to be smart. And in the world, we were expected to be known as being good and smart and very like prominent, even though we had all this really unhealthy culture. So what kind of culture did you come from, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I would say mine was a safe space, right? I think, my mom really helped create a atmosphere that we spoke freely from a place where, I could explain how I feel, what I disagreed with, and maybe not even a space of repercussion, right? I could really articulate that because she created a place where, we all felt heard.
I love that.
Is kind of how I feel.
Yeah.
I mean, she is the first one I've had a shoe thrown at me. So not saying that this was a place of just all sunshine and rainbows.
I'm just going to say that you probably deserved that. Come on.
100%. Yeah, no, that's 100% my fault. But it's a space of I've been able to communicate and articulate how I felt from the inside always. And then we were able to kind of work through whether those feelings are. So yeah, I would say I came from a place of an open line of communication. and in a place where I felt safe being able to express how I felt.
So when you look up what family culture is, it says family culture encompasses the values, norms, traditions, and they guide how the family members think, interact, and live together. I love the concept that culture is not something you are, though it is something you do. It is the action. So the idea that we were secretive was not it. It was the action of keeping our secrets.
Yeah.
That was the culture.
Right. Yeah, and I love how even David York puts culture, and especially like when I'm taking a family through a assessment or kind of walking through a demo, we talk about your values as your purpose, but your culture is the current in which it swims in. Your culture is going to push you forward or it's going to push against you, and your culture is there regardless, right? It's one, if you have two people or more, you have a culture. And so I love how he expressed that. It's the current in which it swims in, which is just fascinating to think if you've been in a current.
Right. Either it's helping you move forward or you're fighting against it. So having a good culture is beneficial. And I love when we're talking about having a good culture, how important it is. I call it the second law of thermodynamics. I have come to find out there is a word for that, entropy. And it means everything is always breaking down. It is getting worse and worse unless you're working on it to make it better. And so when we're talking about family culture, you can't expect to have good, healthy culture if you don't think about it and have an action plan and be moving in a way that is positive, right? Like have that plan. When we at Cornology are doing our assessment, we see culture in 4 ways. We talk about it within the context of communication, family cohesion, family identity, and family impact. And so we're looking at, does the family know these things about themselves? And if not, what can they do to know these things and understand their culture? And maybe they do, but they want to change it. So you purposefully identify and make those adjustments. What are your thoughts in how you've seen families respond?
Yeah, it's one of the things is I've taken families through the assessment and they kind of sit back and look at that. I see brains start to kind of this cog start to kind of go through a lot of these individuals of like, okay, this is how we communicate our cohesion, identity, impact. And it almost, and what I almost feel from it is they go back to almost their place of business of like, okay, what would I do in this situation if this was my business? Okay, I'm going to start creating this space of how do I move this forward? And I can't wait to talk to my kids about how they feel, right? Our communication maybe is a score of 18, right? We give a KPI number score in the Cornology assessment. And it gives them this visualization of like, hey, we're not bad. It's kind of where I thought it would be, but now I have a place where I can move this forward, or at least now a discussion point where now I can move this conversation forward. So they almost kind of light up with like this curiosity of like, okay, this is now I know where I'm at. I have a place to start. Where I think a lot of families in the family space within culture, they don't have a place to start. In business, we've created so many different avenues for businesses to move forward and how to kind of work through it. But there really hasn't been a place for families to have a starting point to kind of move forward.
Yeah, and as an advisor using our system, I just always like to remind everyone, we believe and we have found through all of the research we've done that families are most successful when they know who they are, what they value, what they believe, and they're communicating about those things as a group. And so all of that, the action of that is the culture that comes out. And so when you're sending the assessment for this to the family, you're giving them a tool to know this information. You're giving them a way to have the skills to have successful financial transfer and financial management. Yeah. We love everybody. When you talk about culture, you can't talk about it without talking about the Culture Code, the book. And I know you have done a lot of research and you've studied this book a ton. What is number one thing with the culture?
I mean, and I talk about, there's two books that are my kind of blueprint or whatever for running a good culture, a good team, and Culture Code's one of them. And one of the things that I took out, and I remember when I sat down with my team, I went through these three questions. Do we share a common goal? Are we connected? And are we safe? And when I kind of took a step back and I kind of read through kind of what he was talking about in the Culture Code, do we share a common goal? I remember sitting at a table with my team. I had 11 people in the room, and I asked them, what is our goal as a team? And when I got 8 out of 11 responses, I about had a heart attack. I'm like, this is why we're failing, right? Everybody is swimming in different directions and trying to accomplish different things. And us as a unit, we're not trying to accomplish one thing. So it was awesome to kind of bring it back together what our common goal was. The next one is, are we connected? And Daniel,
and I'm really going to quickly jump back to our report, and that you can find that information. If your family doesn't know what kind of impact they're wanting to make in the world, that means you don't have a common goal. And so it doesn't mean that you haven't identified it clearly so everybody's on the same page.
Right.
So, and this can happen when you have kids at home, and it can still happen when your kids are not there. And you can still have a common goal as a family. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Jump on in.
So back into maybe connected.
Yeah.
So connected was cool because in the book he talks. David Chang he's sitting down interviewing David Chang, and they're sitting in his restaurant, and a waiter drops a plate of food. Right, we've all been there. We've all experienced that not loud crashing in a noisy space.
I've done that. I've been a waitress and dropped it. So yeah, I've experienced that.
And David pauses the interview and he says, let's watch what happens. And he's watching to see what the team does in this situation, right? Are they going to come around and pick up the plate of food and pick up their teammate and say, hey, good, we got your back, let's go? Or is it everyone going to point, laugh, and, oh, great, there's that person again? And so it's a space of like, are we connected? We communicate? Do we support each other? Do we have each other's backs in these moments? And then the last one is, are we safe? And safe was an interesting one because it's not from the physical standpoint, but are we able to articulate or communicate up to the people above us? Did I just go away? Here we go. Are we able to communicate to the people above us of how we're viewing the message or viewing the goal, right? Or I don't like what's going on here. And the repercussions back from either the parent or the boss is from a place of, oh, I welcome feedback. So either I can recommunicate the message, we can shift, we can pivot. But if you don't have that streamlined, open line of communication, right, that's where you have a problem. And so if you can check yes to those 3 pillars, right, you have now the foundation to start to have this great culture.
Right. That's awesome. And so let's equate this to families, right? So talk to me about the common goal as a family. I said impact, but how does that then move into, are we connected as a family?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's basic practices that you can do as a family, right, to kind of work on this space, right? I have a family Sunday meeting around dinner where we just have open conversation, right? We get to hear from everybody, how their week is, what's new, what's going on, but also kind of align on, what is our principles as a family? What are we trying to accomplish? And that could be done from a family dinner. It could be a walk. It could be different exercises or things that you do as a family to find ways to connect and give everybody a chance to voice and kind of express exactly kind of where they're going through.
Yeah, and I think that connects to, are we safe? If you're giving them a safe place to have a conversation and say where we are, that is not just being connected, but being safe at the same time.
Right.
So I think that's a great practice for many families if you want to, start thinking about, how can I build my culture?
Yeah, and I want to even add one other story into, we have a family that's gone through Chronology that based upon their common goal, there was health, there was connection, and they went and planned a year-long trip to go hike Machu Picchu. And in the book, the Culture Code, Daniel Coyle, he's interviewing some Navy SEALs, and they're basically saying, if you want to really connect people, do something hard together, right? Go through something strenuous. And so the fact that family did that hike through Machu Picchu, right? That's a step in the right direction of kind of putting yourself through suffering.
Well, and not every family is going to be able to go to Machu Picchu, but my family is probably a very good example right now. We are all fully embedded, and I probably talk about this every week, in my kids' volleyball, right? Like, he's nationally competitive volleyball player, and we as a family are fully engaged in helping him succeed in this. So we almost every weekend are at a tournament as a group. We know our goal is to do this together. Um, my husband has spent the last 2 weeks trying to put technology together for the team to get good stats for them. Right? Like, whatever we can do, whatever piece we can play to help build that goal, we're staying connected in this common idea of my kid and his volleyball team. Now, don't get me wrong, it is a ton of fun. Like, watching them play and having him do this is not just fun for him, but it's fun for us.
A little stressful, right? As you're watching, I know there's
There
stress
is
that happens, crazy.
definitely there are some moments of stress. It's a conversation for another day, but I do a full streaming on his volleyball, and you can hear how stressed I am sometimes because he had a bad serving day last weekend, and I was like, oh my gosh, right? My kid is struggling, and every parent can relate to that. But as a family, we have chosen to make this our common goal right now. His goal is our goal. So every family can say, his goal is our goal, or her goal is our goal, and we're going to do it as a family and make it successful together.
I love that. Absolutely love that.
Yeah. So how can families do this? One of the things two of my favorite books, one is Atomic Habits. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It is all about, life change through a 1%. Change 1% every day, and you end up being in a completely different place in the future. Long-term changes. And so one of the very first things he talks about in Atomic Habit is not trying to get habit changes to change who you are, but when you have an identity, then your output changes. So if you have an identity as a family and you spend time communicating that identity, you will, I think, naturally, out of a habit of communicating that, have a different output as a family.
I love that, right? And we see that even through the assessment, and then people that we've taken through it, is when they now see they're a family of connection, strength, determination, loyalty, justice. And then even within there, giving different resources, the way that you can resource money or you resource time together, right? It builds that identity of this purpose of who we are. And you just see people light up of, now we're living through what we value the most as a family and as a unit. And that connection, that identity just goes through the roof. It's pretty fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it becomes the action. So the other thing I love is the book Grit. That's another book if you haven't read. It is so interesting. Grit can be built, and it is the biggest determiner of success in every different field. So in all the hardest places, the people that tend to find success through the hardness, becoming a Navy SEAL, becoming, a PhD, finishing college, finishing high school, is, yes, to have grit. And over time, I'm just going to read this. Over time, under the right circumstances, the norms and values of groups to which we belong become our own. We internalize them. We carry them with us, the way we do things around here, and why they eventually becomes the very way I do things around here. So instead of the way we do things, it becomes the way I do things. So I think there is so much hope in that for parents, because if you're on a regular basis saying, and she says this in the book, is if you're saying, we as a family, we are kind, we are kind, we are kind, then your child is eventually saying, I am kind, right? We work hard. then your child is eventually saying, I work hard,
Mm.
right? So we are about connection, right? So I'm now going back and connecting us to the family's core values. So you get to know your core values through our assessment, and then you have your family's 5 core values. And if you're always talking about we are a family of wisdom, then we are a family of wisdom. It becomes that because
Mhm.
we're talking about it as a group and a team all the time.
Absolutely, and the thing that I love kind of about what we're talking about is we're getting a chance to hear what everybody's values are, and then we combine those scores together so that it is everybody. There's so many times that we see in families that it's the parents, right? It's the patriarch, matriarch, it's their values, and as a family, this is what we're doing. But if your kids' values are different, if they have different, ideas and thoughts,
Mhm.
that's where sometimes this conflict happens and you're not bringing people together, and why this discontent happens within families because, oh, this is always what mom and dad wanted to do, this isn't what, we never had a voice. And so the fact that you can get those things together and understand everybody's voice is what a lot of times things change. So
I love this quote that from Culture Code that is talking about highly successful cultures are happy and lighthearted. That's not really the case. It's they're energized and engaged, but they have a place to have solve problems together. They have a place to have good feedback and communication. They have a place, that safe conversation that you were talking about earlier,
mhm.
Nick, that is part of having a healthy culture.
It is. We see that all the time. Like healthy cultures, there's conflict. It's not all sunshine and rainbows in great family cultures or in business cultures, right? They fight, they scratch, they claw, but they come to a place of understanding and listening and
Mhm.
giving those people that voice. And so it's not always, hey, everything's perfect, but they understand and create places for difficult conversations
Mm.
and talk through those things versus, oh, we're going to ignore this or we're going to push this to the side or we're going to live in ambiguity or we're not going to talk about this because of feelings or whatever it may be. Like, hey, if we can get through this and work through these issues together as families, that's where we start seeing families that thrive or business cultures that thrive, is that healthy discussion and conflict are the spaces that really help us have these
Mhm.
authentic and beautiful relationships and families.
And talk to me about how, within the context of that healthy communication, that you want to create a good, solid foundation. What does that look like, Nick?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, right? Because I think, legacy is going to happen whether you put time into it or not, right? And so as families are creating this lasting legacy of, a family that, as you talked about, is wise or that is, work ethic, whatever it may be, um, they're going to happen whether you put time into it or not. And so for us and having those healthy conversations, it's that space of creating that legacy, whether it's transferring wealth, creating, great kids that you're pushing on into the world. I mean, that's I think what we all as parents hope for is creating that space for our kids to thrive and be successful, and we're setting up for success in the future. And so, I mean, kind of when I look at that question of, man, what am I hoping for? What am I trying to create and putting in that work to put them in
Mm.
a situation to be successful? And so, my legacy is going to be what it is, regardless if I put time or effort into it, right? Whether it's good or bad, it's still a legacy. And so, what I want that to look like.
Well, and I think that that's where we started our conversation, Nick, is we said, you're going to have culture. You're going to have culture, which leaves legacy, really.
Mhm,
And if you're not working on that culture, it tends to degrade. And if you're working on it, it tends to get better.
mhm,
And so if you spend time on it and have purpose through it, it will naturally get better. Like we're saying, if you're always talking about doing this, then you tend to, as a family, do it. I love one more reference to Grit, the book Grit, because I can't recommend it enough. Um, she says there's a real hard way to get it, and there's an easy way. The hard way is to do it by yourself. The easy way is to use conformity, the basic human drive to fit in is you're around all these gritty people, you're going to get grittier. And so I think that's hopeful. That's hopeful for parents because it is easier to do it as a team together. Um, if you have a culture in your family of being gritty, your family is going to be gritty. If you as a parent tend to be gritty, your kids are going to see that and they're going to learn from you and do that. So that's an incredibly hopeful statement to me.
For sure. I mean, we always hear that as parents is that your kids are always watching, regardless of what it is that you're doing. They're always watching you. And so it's that space of they start to see and model some of those behaviors based upon, right, what they see from you as a parent, whether that's, you eat, clean, you work out, um, you have that grit, the work
Mm,
ethic, the
mm,
drive, the way that you talk to your spouse, the way you talk to them. They're
yeah.
making these decisions within their lives of how they want to live, how they want to do based upon these
Mhm.
situations. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's if you talk about that space and become that space, that's where I think that family
Yeah.
culture tends to thrive.
And it's just again and again, I love it's like that positive reinforcement and that positive peer pressure. It's a positive peer pressure for your family. And once again, advisors, this is such a gift you are giving to families. They value what's coming from you. They can value and then connect to you as you know and understand their family and their family's culture and can communicate about that to them. They feel more trust, more loyalty, and more connection to you as the advisor if you provide these tips and tricks to their life, right? Like everybody talks about life hacks. And I think, dude, I can use every life hack you could give me. I will take it because, life is hard.
For
So,
sure.
understanding family culture and choosing to define your family culture is a life hack.
Yeah. No, I love that space. And, I would just throw it out to all those advisors out there that, feel like, oh, wow, what if the culture's bad within a family? I have yet to see a person that has gone through it not want to take ownership of that, to not say,
Mm,
okay, this is mine. So it's not you to fix the problem. It's not the advisor to be the counselor, right? You can provide counsel, of course, but it's a space where these parents are getting this, or your clients are getting this tool and this resource to look at, oh, this is where my family's at. Okay, I've got some work to do, or this is awesome. This is the direction that we've been going in. And they're almost excited of like, thank you, right? Now I have a starting point. And I
mm.
think that's the spot that I just really want to highlight is that in businesses, we have all these tools to get us to like that next level. But within our family space, what is that KPI? What is that number? What does that look like? What is my family starting place so that I can move it forward? And I think that's what this tool provides is that a space where, okay, now I know where we're at. This is what I have to do.
Yeah, I think as we wrap this up today, Nick, let's talk about what the good walkaways are. I mean, I want to come back to what you said at the very beginning. Good culture is a recipe for success. And so if you take time to define your culture, use our tool or do it yourself. But I would definitely say spend time defining what you want your culture to look like. What's the next step that you would say they should walk away with, Nick?
I would do a weekly or find time to create that space for the family to be able to voice who they are, what they value. Like you want everybody in your family to feel valued, heard, and respected. What
Mhm.
environments, like you would in business, right? Team meetings, huddles, one-on-ones. What are the spaces that you're creating with your family so that they can have those same spaces to express how they feel, talk about what maybe they disagree with or don't like at the moment, and how as a family they can be better. So whether that's walks, dinners, hikes, things like that, you can do with your family to create that space.
One of my favorite options is drives. How much time do we spend in the car with our family right now? That is a great place to have open conversation, um, and utilize this time, windshield time together. But if let's just say your kids are grown,
Hmm.
what are some options for having that communication, Nick?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, instead of the normal check in, how's the family, what are things on? like, how do you get a little more purposeful? How do you talk through about things maybe your grown adult child values? How can you support them? Um, it all comes back to creating that place of opportunity for you guys to communicate and talk about, the purpose and where you're going.
Okay, so as you walk away, spend time defining your core culture, and then spend time with the rest of your family talking about that culture and giving a safe space for them to communicate back. Do a lot of listening. And I would say one walk away that I am alluding to next week is maybe spend time writing, taking your core values and writing a family mission statement,
Mm,
because that could be a family goal. And I am happy to say next week, Nate will be hosting, and he is specifically going to talk about this. So I think this conversation leads right into what he'll be talking about next week.
awesome.
Yeah, so I'm actually gone. I'm saying that in a roundabout way. I'm gone next week. I'm traveling. I'll be at the XYPN conference. I'm excited to see any of you that are there. Please give me a call or come see me. I would love to meet you. And while I'm gone, Nate will be hosting our stream. So thank you so much for being with us, Nick. And I'm looking forward to, if anybody has questions, as always, please give me a call or shoot me an email. I am happy to talk to anyone at any time. And we'll see you. Well, Nate, we'll see you next week, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right.